I think it's recording now. 9:53, February 18. ¿Dónde me quedé? Still here. Studying. Cards remained. Those you found. Good heavens, what to do? Open the door sound abruptly. All 3 flights is here. I don't remember where I left off at. Damn. I'll just turn the bottom of the page. At last, he reached the turning. He turned down, more dead than alive. Here, he was halfway to safety. And here understood it. It was less risky because there was a great crowd of people, and he was lost in it, like a little grain of sand. But all he had suffered had so weakened him that he could scarcely move. Perspiration ran down him in drops. His neck was all wet. My word, he has been going through it. Someone shouted at him when he came out on the canal bank. He was only dimly conscious of himself now, and the further he went, the worse it was. He remembered, however, that on coming out to the canal bank, he was alarmed at finding few people there, and so being more, I don't know how to pronounce that, conspicuous, I think that's what it is.
Conspicuous.
Oh, okay. Standing out so as to be clearly visible. And he had thought of turning back. Though he was almost falling from fatigue, he went on a long way around so as to get home from quite a different direction. He was not fully conscious when he passed through the gateway of his house. He was already on a staircase before he recollected the axe. And yet he had a very grave problem before him: to put it back and to escape observation as far as possible. In doing so, he was of course incapable of reflecting that it might perhaps, it says he, but I think it's be far better. I don't know, I'm still reading it as he far better not to, okay, never mind, I'm tripping. He was of course incapable of reflecting that it might perhaps he far better not to restore the axe at all, but to drop it later on somebody's yard. But all happened fortunately. The door of the porter's room was closed, but not locked, so that it seemed most likely that the porter was at home. But he had so completely lost all power of reflection that he walked straight to the door and opened it. If the porter had asked him, "What do you want?" he would have perhaps simply handed him the axe. But again, the porter was not at home. And he succeeded in putting the axe back under the bench and even covering it with the chunk of wood as before. He met no one, not a soul. Afterwards, On the way to his room, the landlady's door was shut. When he was in his room, he flung himself on the sofa just as he was. He did not sleep, but sank into blank forgetfulness. If anyone had come into his room then, he could have jumped up at once and screamed. Scraps and shreds of thoughts were simply swarming in his brain. But he could not catch one at one. He could not rest on one, in spite of all his efforts. Alright, this is part 2. Okay. Chapter 1. Wait. I'll figure it out later. I'm gonna give a summary every few chapters, but I don't know how many chapters. I'm gonna just keep going. So he lay a very long while. Now and then he seemed to wake up, and at such moments he noticed that it was far into the night. But it did not occur to him to get up. At last he noticed that it was beginning to get light. He was lying on his back, still dazed from his recent oblivion. Fearful, despairing cries rose shrilly from the street, sounds which he heard every night, indeed, under his window after 2 o'clock. They woke him up now. Ah, the drunken men are coming out of the taverns, he thought. It's past 2 o'clock. And at once he leaped up as though someone had pulled him from the sofa. What? Past 2 o'clock? He sat down on the sofa and instantly recollected everything. All at once, in one flash, he recollected everything. From the first moment, he thought he was going mad. A dreadful chill came over him, but the chill was from the fever that had begun long before in his sleep. Now he was suddenly taken with violent shivering, so that his teeth chattered and all his limbs were shaking. He opened the door and began listening. Everything in the house was asleep. With amazement, he gazed at himself and everything in the room around him, wondering how he could have come in the night before without fastening the door, and have flung himself on the sofa without undressing, without even taking his hat off. It had fallen off and was lying on the floor near his pillow. If anyone had come in, what would he have thought? That I'm drunk, but he rushed to the window. There was light enough, and he began hurriedly looking at himself all over, head to foot, all his clothes. Were there no traces? But there was no doing it like that. Shivering with cold, he began taking off everything and looking over again. He turned everything over to the last threads and rags, and mistrusting himself, went through his search 3 times. But there seemed to be nothing, no trace. Ah, fuck me. I'm gonna set the timer. Let me set the timer real quick. Bro, I do that shit every time. No trace except in one place, where some thick drops of, I don't know how to pronounce that. Es como congelado, pero no sé cómo decirlo en inglés. Congealed. Having become semi-solid, especially on cooling. Congelado. Congealed. Drops of congealed blood were clinging to the frayed edge of his trousers. He picked up a big clasp knife and cut off the frayed threads. There seemed to be nothing more. Suddenly, he remembered that the purse and the things he had taken out of the old woman's box were still in his pockets. He had not thought till then of taking them out and hiding them. He had not even thought of them while he was examining his clothes. What next? Instantly, he rushed to take them out and and fling them on the table. When he pulled out everything and turned the pocket inside out to be sure that there was nothing left, he carried the whole heap to the corner. The paper had come off the bottom of the wall and hung there in taters. I think it's taters, but just to make sure. Tatters. Never mind, I was wrong. Irregularly torn pieces of cloth, paper, or other material. Wait, what was the name?
Tatters.
He began stuffing all the things into the hole under the paper. They're in, all out of sight. In the purse too, he thought gleefully, getting up and gazing blankly at the hole, which bulged out more than ever. Suddenly, he shredded all over with horror. "My God," he whispered in despair. "What's the matter with me? Is that hidden? Is that the way to hide things?" He had not reckoned on having trinkets to hide. He had only thought of money, and so had not prepared a hiding place. But now, what am I glad of? He thought. Is that hiding things? My reasons deserting me, simply? He sat down on the sofa in exhaustion and was at once shaken by another unbearable fit of shivering. Mechanically, he drew from a chair beside him his old student's winter coat, which was still warm, though almost in rags, covered himself up with it, and once more sank into drowsiness and delirium. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Delirium. I think it is. Delirium. You're not gonna put me the whack. He lost consciousness. Not more than 5 minutes had passed when he jumped up a second time and at once pounced in frenzy on his clothes again. How could I go asleep again with nothing done? Yes. I have not taken the loop off the armhole. I forgot it. Forgot a thing like that? Such a piece of evidence? He pulled off the noose, hurriedly cut it to pieces and threw the bits among his linen under the pillow. Pieces of torn linen could not rouse suspicion. Whatever happened, I think not. Anyway, he repeated, standing in the middle of the room. And with painful concentration, he fell to gazing about him again, at the floor and everywhere, trying to make sure he had not forgotten anything. Sorry. The conviction that all his faculties, even memory, and the simplest power of reflection were failing him, began to be insufferable torture. Surely it isn't the beginning already. Surely it isn't my punishment coming upon me. It is. The frayed rags he had cut off his trousers were actually lying on the floor in the middle of the room, where anyone coming in would see them. "What's the matter with me?" he cried again, like one distraught. Then a strange idea entered his head, that perhaps all his clothes were covered with blood, that perhaps there were a great many stains, but that he did not see them, but did not notice them because his perceptions were failing, were going to pieces. His reason was clouded. Suddenly, he remembered that there had been blood on the purse too. Ah, then there must be blood on the pocket too, for I put the wet purse in my pocket. In a flash, he turned to the pocket inside out, and yes, there were traces, stains on the linen of the pocket. So my reason has not quite deserted me. So I still have some time. So I still have some sense and memory. Since I guessed it of myself, he thought triumphantly. I think I got it, but I still want to know how to pronounce it.
Triumphantly.
In a way that shows great happiness or joy at victory or achievement. Triumphantly, with a deep sigh of relief. It's simply the weakness of fever, a moment of delirium. And he tore the whole lining out of the left pocket of his trousers. At that instant, the sunlight fell on his left boot, on the sock which poked out from the boot. He fancied there were traces. He flung out his boots, traces indeed. The tip of the sock was soaked with blood. He must have I'm not even gonna. Oh wow. I'm not gonna watch a video just to. I'm gonna just say unwarily stepped into that pool. But what am I to do with this now? Where am I to put the sock and rags and pocket? He gathered them all up in his hands and stood in the middle of the room. In the stove? But they could ransack the stove first of all. Burn them? But what can I burn them with? There are no matches even. No, better go out and throw it all away. Somewhere. Yes. Better throw it away. He repeated, sitting down on the sofa again. And at once, this minute, without lingering. But his head sank on the pillow instead, against the unbearable, icy shivering. Sorry. Let me run that back. But his head sank on the pillow instead. Again, the unbearable, icy shivering came over him. Again, he drew his coat over him. And for a long while, for some hours, he was haunted by the impulse to go off somewhere at once, this moment, and fling it all away, so that it may be out of sight and done with. At once. Several times he tried to rise from the sofa, but could not. He was thoroughly waked up at last by a violent knocking at his door. Open, do. Are you dead or alive? He keeps sleeping here, shouted Natasha, banging with her fist on the door. For whole days together, he's snoring like a dog. A dog he is too. Open, I tell you, it's past 10. Maybe he's not at home, said a man's voice. Ha, that's the porter's voice. What does he want? He jumped up and sat on the sofa. The beating of his heart was a positive pain. Then who can I have latched the door? Resorted fuck, I can't pronounce the name. Nastasia. He's taking to bolting himself in, as if he were worth stealing. Open, you stupid. Wake up. What do they want? Why the porter? All's discovered. Resist or open? Come what may. He half rose, stooped forward, and unlatched the door. His room was so small that he could undo the latch without leaving the bed. Yes? The porter and Nastasia were standing there. Nastasia stared at him in a strange way. He glanced with a defiant and desperate air at the porter, who, without a word, held out a gray folded paper sealed with bottle wax. A notice from the office, he announced, as he gave him the paper. From what office? A summons to police office, of course. You know which office. To the police? What for? How can I tell you're sent for? So you go. Oh, sorry. What can I how I'm butchering that shit. How can I tell you're sent for? So you go. The man looked at him attentively. Looked round for the room. Never mind, bro. Give me one sec. Run it back. The man looked at him attentively, looked round the room, and turned to go away. He's downright ill, observed Nastasia, not taking her eyes off him. The porter turned his head for a moment. He's been in a fever since yesterday, she added. Raskolnikov made no response and held the paper in his hands, without opening it. Don't you get up then, Nastasia went on compassionately, seeing that he was letting his feet down from the sofa. You're ill, and so don't go. There's no such hurry. What have you got there? He looked. In his right hand he held the shreds he had cut from his trousers, the sock, and the rags of the pocket. So he had been asleep with them in his hand. Afterwards, reflecting upon it, he remembered that half waking up in his fever, he had grasped all this tightly in his hand, and so falling asleep again. Look at the rags he's collected, and sleeps with them, as though he's got a hold of a treasure. And Nastasia went off into her hysterical giggle. Instantly, he thrust them all under his greatcoat and fixed his eyes intently upon her. Far as he was from being capable of rational reflection at that moment, he felt that no one would behave like that. Sorry, I got lost. Far as he was from being capable of rational reflection at that moment, he felt that no one would behave like that with a person who was going to be arrested. But the police? You'd better have some tea. Yes? I'll bring it. There's some left. No, I'm going. I'll go at once, he muttered, getting onto his feet. Why? You'll never get downstairs. Yes, I'll go. As you please. She followed the porter out. At once, he rushed to the light to examine the sock and the rags. There are stains, but not very noticeable, all covered with dirt and rubbed and already discolored. No one who had no suspicion could distinguish anything. Nastasia, from a distance, could not have noticed. Thank God. And then, with a tremor, he had broke the seal of the notice and began reading. He was a long while reading, before he understood, it was an ordinary summons from the district police station to appear that day past 9 at the office of district superintendent. I think I'm gonna just leave it there.